Thank you very much again for being open to continue this exploration. It's kind of a hot subject, so I'm happy you're not saying that was enough. First thing I want to ask before we start watching the videos, what was your experience seeing the comments?
I honestly, I think I read maybe 4 or 5 of the comments, and when I realized there were a whole bunch of negatives, I went, and I stopped reading them.
Okay, so not worth it.
Right.
I found it kind of interesting, and I dug in a little bit because oftentimes, I don't so much anymore, but in the old days I used to do martial arts forums and, get bogged down into arguments about what worked and what didn't work. And it was interesting because looking at the comments, you see the same comments and types of comments over and over again. It's the same thing people have been saying 10 years ago. And so I don't take any of it personally. And in some ways, I'm really glad that people engage with content and express their ideas and what they think is true and not true. And then, you can read through the comments and make up your own mind, and it's fine. And so I don't take any of that stuff personally. I find it kind of fascinating and interesting. And you see the same types of comments over and over again. For example, well, that's all fine unless you add knives or biting or something or groin strikes, and like, oh man, I'm gonna punch you in the nuts thing again. They've been saying that for 10 or 15 years as if that's the thing that's gonna somehow change the equation, or that we've never thought about that in jiu-jitsu. And so those kinds of comments you see over and over and over again, and in some ways it's a little bit disheartening, like, are we still having that argument? But in some ways, it's also an indicator that, yes, maybe we still need to have that argument, because there's a lot of people that still haven't moved beyond it. It's all right.
Some of the criticism was, how can Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belts analyze Aikido? It's like they would not understand. And for me, that's a ridiculous statement. But what's your interpretation of that?
Well, it doesn't make sense because the greater concept is just fighting.
Right. Yes.
You're going to have fighting, and then you're going to have 2 big categories, grappling and striking.
Right.
And when they're combined, you get MMA. When they're taken apart, you get kickboxing, boxing, Thai boxing, folk style, scholastic wrestling, jiu-jitsu, judo. You can break them down even more to the individual rule sets. But at some point, it's grappling plus striking being fighting. If whatever you're doing doesn't at least have a conceptual road directly to, well, here's what happens when you're grappling and striking, it's almost like we're not having the same conversation. So why would I carry on? Yeah. If you don't have that pathway into conceptually putting yourself in striking plus grappling.
Right. It would be problematic if we were looking at Aikido videos and I'm discussing the efficacy of an Aikido technique as an Aikido technique. Like, if I was doing, I don't know the name of any Aikido techniques, but if I was doing that, my foot would be out at this angle instead of that angle, because that's how somebody taught me how to do it. Then that would be completely ridiculous. But I can look at things like training methods, and I can look at techniques and then base that on my thousands and thousands of hours of experience working with somebody, trying to prevent me from being successful in grappling, and say, well, based on what I know about grappling, and I know a lot about grappling because I've done a lot of grappling, I don't think that would work, or I think that would work, or here's what my problem with it is. I can do that because I have that expertise. Less so in boxing, but I do have some boxing experience enough to know some basics about what works and what doesn't work. And so as long as I'm sticking to my area of expertise, I can completely talk about any grappling art, I think, and have, in theory, something interesting or important to say.
What we're going to look at is, oftentimes it's referred to as Tomiki Aikido, because the founder's surname was Tomiki, but official name is Shodokan. But for some reason, people are lazy and they say Tomiki style. Also, I think it's partly disrespectful because done in some kind of a subtle, disrespectful way, because Aikido people, most of them are against this particular style. It's the only well-known Aikido style which has competition, and most Aikido schools, they're like, this is trash, this is not real Aikido, don't look at it, this is fake, because idealistically, like in this ideology of Aikido, there's no competition. That's what the founder would say. There should be no competition because, in his opinion, competition kind of sets people apart, and that was his philosophy, and that's why he removed competition from Aikido. This particular style had competition in it, but that's where a lot of people give it a hard time. It's like, it has competition. Like, what's that about? And so which is crazy because I think it deserves a lot of respect. If you want to stop somewhere.
And so at that point in the competition, one guy put the other guy down. That would be some sort of awarding of points or something.
So that's the thing is it's a small style. It's hard to find it. It's very popular in UK, but I think because UK people are a little bit like England, people are a little bit more combative. But aside that, this school is difficult to find. There's even not a single school of that in my country, so I never was exposed to it.
So this is pretty rare then.
It is, and I never had direct experience myself. So I presume that definitely looks like a point. But honestly, I never...
Do you know anything about the rule sets?
No.
What's really interesting to me, and you can chime in, as I watched it was, there's a lot of movement and footwork and setting people up, so it's obviously not choreographed, and they're moving in and out of, so they're kind of in longer range. They go into striking range, that I would call it, and then they go into clinch range and they come back out, and then... here there was one guy caught the other guy flat-footed and shoved him over, which was great. But what's interesting to me is, well, there appears to be no striking, which is fine. So it becomes a grappling competition. But we'll have to watch more. But I haven't seen any grabbing yet, which is really, really an interesting limitation. And so I've never seen a grappling competition that didn't involve grabbing. And so you can see how it completely changes the game. So let's watch a little more and see if there is actually any grabbing and what that would look like. So obviously no kicking, no striking, and so far no grabbing.
Yes. Kind of like very light grabs. Like nothing.
Yeah, so the hands tie up a little bit, and then there you go. There was like a throw by.
Right.
A lot of footwork, and the footwork looks kind of judo-ish. So far I've only seen what I would call incidental grabbing. Oh, there's a beautiful throw.
Yeah.
And here's why it's fascinating to me. And so I never would have thought about this, but if you had to develop a competition style and rule set that would fit really well with what I know about Aikido, then this would be it.
Right.
And because when you watch, and this is why I watched this one at really slow speed, because what you see if you could watch it at really slow speed is that same sort of overcommitment that you see when you watch Aikido demos where people step really big and extend really far. You can see these two competitors doing that to and with each other kind of as feints to try to get the other person to step really big. And the thing that would thwart all of that would be striking, like real striking or kicking, but let's take that out and let's make it a grappling competition. And then the other thing that would thwart it would be grabbing. And so if you take those two things out, then you get an art where people are overstepping and they're extending too far, and then you're cutting angles with your footwork to try to catch them in that spot. And then you get a thing where it works really beautifully within that one core, what appears to be a rule set. And so I'm guessing there's got to be a rule against grabbing, because if one person grabbed the other one, then it would kind of be all done. Let's watch a little bit more. You haven't seen that much of this?
No.
This one's the same one, or
scroll back a little bit and let's just watch a little bit of a part of it again.
Yeah, I want to watch their feet because.
But what I can say that I really love about the video is the working against active resistance and then isolating a really specific skill set. And so, this is a competition, but I could see this as a training drill or method. So, hey, we're going to move. I'm going to cut angles on you. I'm going to try to catch you off balance, and I'm going to use pushing and shoving and a little bit of light pulling and hand entanglement to see if I can upset your balance. We're going to take out kicking, we're going to take out striking, and we're going to take out long-term grabbing, gripping. And if we remove those things, then let's use what's left and let's see if we can upset each other's balance and knock each other over in a way where you're trying not to let me be successful. That's what you have here, which is a great isolation drill, but you have to be really particular about what it's isolating and what it's training, and what it's isolating and training is just that.
This seems like a great competition. I agree with Coach Kane. It's both sides are active, they're alive, they're trying to accomplish a set of goals. It's hard for me to place in the striking grappling concept where this falls. I don't see a line getting me from what they're doing to, oh, someone's trying to hit me or hold me on the ground. I don't see that line.
Great point, and also it reminds me. So I keep hearing the same rumor again and again, and so probably it's at least partly true. That the backstory of what happened is the founder of the style, Tomiki, he wanted to add Aikido into universities, but they had judo was very popular at the day. Probably he was like a black belt in judo as well. That used to be a thing. People who had a black belt something else would come to train Aikido. Right. There was a demand from the university apparently that we need a competitive element. Only then we will accept you. Mm-hmm. And that's apparently how he's like, he decided, okay, let's make the competition element to it. It would make sense that that's the main purpose. Yeah. Just like to make it competitive, but not like to translate it to like realistic fighting, I guess, because if somebody grabs you, that's
sure. If you took this exact competition in art and then you allowed extended grappling, then it would look 100% like judo. Yeah. And not 98%, not 99%, it would become judo, and then the people who would win this competition would be people with extensive judo experience, and then in order to get good at this competition, you would have to train judo. Right. And so that's a thing, and so when you change the rule sets, then the skill sets needed to win would change, and I could see why if you were trying to develop an Aikido competition, you would have to say, hey, we have to not allow extended grips. Because then Aikido becomes judo. And then if you add striking in, then you say, hey, we have to take striking out, because if you add striking in and you don't have gripping, then it becomes boxing. And then if you add punching and kicking in, then you have to say, hey, we have to take that out, because if you take this exact competition and you allow punching and kicking in, then it becomes kickboxing. And so any of those things would turn it into an art that's not Aikido. And so that's why this was really fascinating to me. It was like, oh my God, they figured out a way to take the skill sets that happen in Aikido and then make it a competition in a way that if you exclude all these things, those other arts can't influence it.
My question here then though, looking at this, how much value would you see? Like I know or heard some percentage of jiu-jitsu people would go and train some judo to enhance their game, like just to enhance their takedowns. But looking at this, would you think it would be valid for a jiu-jitsu practitioner to go do this, to learn this, to improve their jiu-jitsu game? Do you think there would be much value here?
No, because like I said earlier, I don't see a single conceptual pathway to grappling plus striking equaling fight. I don't see that road for what's going on here. I can immediately see, what's the very first rule that if you relax changes everything? Coach Kane's already said it. If you could grab, this becomes judo very quickly. In which case, I'd say, well, then.
Wasn't that interesting watching? It's like I've never seen anything like that.
No, it's for a while there was this thing that was called beach wrestling. It was kind of interesting. You go to any beach and you just draw a big circle, and whoever can knock the other person down. So it was this, very strange kind of wrestling. I mean, you see that kind of rule set if you go to, different parts of the world, and somebody tried to codify it, make it a part of the whatever the World Wrestling group that supports Olympic wrestling. And I remember watching it, going, "This is so weird. We have wrestling already.
Right.
Why do we want this?"
Right.
It seemed like a little bit like that. So just
remove this,
remove this, get your geese and show up at 2.
It's like there was a short-lived thing that was really bizarre. It was arm wrestling and MMA combined.
Yeah, I saw that.
Where you try to arm wrestle the other guy, but you could also punch. And so it kind of has that feel a little bit like, okay, you could, but...
If you randomly, you have a random number generator and you have a list of rules and this is going to have 4 rules. You go, okay.
Let's get them. I'd like to look at the other one where there was a weapon involved, because I'm hoping you have some insight on that one, because I had a hard time understanding some of what was going on.
I did train knife defense in Aikido, and when I realized how knife defense really works, it's really terrible. Too static, too idealistic. It's like so many bad things, but we'll look at this. So I heard this numerous times, again, never experienced, because Aikido has this ideology of there's the attacker and the defender. That you should not be the aggressor. And I think that that's why they use a person with a quote-unquote knife object.
Oh, so it's to have separate roles, so the competitors are not doing the same thing.
Right, so that philosophy, that ideology of I'm defending, I'm not using any aggression, I'm not initiating, is there. So there's a knife attacker, and also knife attacks are trained, theoretically in Aikido.
Well, because what I was wondering about is as I'm watching the competition happen here, I see one guy get stabbed like 30 times, and then the other guy throws, and then there's some points awarded. And so it seemed like, how come when the guy gets stabbed, it's not the end of the match, or he doesn't die or something, so you can see it. That makes more sense that you're setting up a scenario where the person has to, you're setting up two different jobs or two different roles, and then somehow it's competitive that way.
Although my criticism, to me, it looks like the knife attackers, they're kind of going easy. They're not shanking and just like going crazy, going nuts. If you learn, and this, I guess, I'm not even sure about that myself, but if you learn on these conditions, is that getting you used to receiving knife stabs? And that would be my question.
Yeah, it doesn't seem, the knife work doesn't seem very realistic.
Right.
One of our black belt coaches from Chicago, Paul Sharp, did a whole section on knife defense. 99.9% of the time, if there's a knife, you just run. Okay, so that last sliver, and he said, what you have to do is you have to get on YouTube and you have to look up prison fight videos, and you'll see how people actually use knives, because prison is knife culture, and those guys don't use knives.
Right, for sure.
Anything like what's going on here.
Well, the knife actually makes their martial arts worse, because A, they're not stabbing intentionally, and B, I see the knife slicing all over the other guy, and he's pretending it doesn't exist, and then executing a throw. And so what the knife is doing is actually, for the attacker, it's occupying his hand in a way that he can't defend himself with it. So it would be the same equivalent as one guy tucking his hand in his belt and then trying to fight, because it becomes completely useless. And so, and that I don't quite understand what's going on. I mean, there's timing, energy, motion, and resistance, but the knife becomes an impediment for one person based on what I see. And I may have a complete misunderstanding of the rules. I'm just kind of looking at what I see going on. And I see lots of body slicing and bad stabbing. And if the knife was part of the scoring system, it seems like in every one of these, it would be fairly easy for one person to stab the other person like 8 times, and then it would be over. I don't quite get what's going on.
Yeah.
But there's some beautiful throws and things going on here that look great.
That looks much better in this video. It looks to me like, whoever the knife holder is getting thrown with a lot better throws, and they look to me like old judo throws.
You know what's going on that I just kind of noticed is what the knife does is it prevents one person from getting grips. And then there's actual gripping going on here, which why it looks different. And so it's the equivalent of one person being one-handed and then the other person being two-handed, and now you have gripping and throwing. And so the knife puts the attacker in a spot where they're doing really bad judo, and the other person has judo. So sometimes in our training, we'll do that exact handicap and have one person only use one arm in a grappling situation, just to handicap so that the other person has a bit more of an advantage as part of a drill. And that's kind of what it looks like is going on here. And so it's not effective. It's not showing skill against a knife defense. It's really just handicapping one person in the scenario so the other person has better grappling. That's what I see. Is that what you see too?
Yeah, so I'm wondering, the non-knife participant, these are all throws and takedowns that I didn't see anywhere else in Aikido.
Sure, yeah.
So, I mean, this seems like 1970s, 1980s judo.
Yeah,
when they could still go and grab the knee and stuff like that. It's beautiful.
Right. It's really great you're bringing up this point. That was on my mind when I would watch this, is you're training Aikido, all these techniques, and this is kind of our conclusion on the mat from our previous video. It's like, eventually, if you add the competitive or the resistant live element, it just starts to look like judo. So it's like, why would we?
It starts to look like one of the arts that trains with resistance.
Right, exactly.
And live opponents.
Just starts to disappear, all that
Yep.
unique Aikido movements, and then
Sure.
the question mark is there, like, so why do we train them initially?
Yep.
I'm more impressed with the competition stuff we saw right at the beginning, not with the knife, but just for the reasons Coach Kane articulated. It looked like, they had decided, okay, here's the rules. Those rules mimic what we're trying to do in Aikido, and now we're competing on those vectors. I'm like, oh, okay. I could start analyzing how good you were at Aikido watching your competition performance. And if that's what somebody wanted to do, okay. People want to do lots of different competitions. Badminton, poker. I mean, they want to compete. So that's totally fine. Big caveat, I just don't see a conceptual path along those trajectories to striking plus grappling equals fighting. I just don't see where it doesn't already run through something that people are doing, like judo.
Right. They're not kind of using the missing element. They're not bringing it up.
Right.
I would not change a word from that answer. I think that's great. I was really happy to see the competition videos because I think I'd asked somewhere, does anybody have any videos of people doing Aikido with active resistance where somebody was resisting, and there it was. And so it was really nice to be able to see that. So
probably looks like how Aikido should look, like idealistically based on its philosophy, but it doesn't look like Aikido training, like the Aikido training we normally see. It's like, it doesn't look like it. It doesn't look like Aikido the way it's traditional.
Martial arts techniques, when you add resistance, always look way uglier than they do in the non-resistant training, even in jiu-jitsu. If you train your eye, you can still see the efficacy of techniques, but when you see it with live resistance, it always looks a lot less beautiful.
It takes a lot of time to recognize what, as a white belt, you would look and go, I don't know, those guys they're hugging each other and it looks violent and it looks like they're trying to get at each other's wallets or something. That over the years you go, oh, that's beautiful. Wow, they did that.
Yeah,
but,
it's harder to see.
Yeah.